You're watching Man of Metropolis. Today's guest is actor Micah Stock. I'm Seth Travis. I'm a creative director here in New York City and also founder of Man of Metropolis and Metropolis Report.
Furthermore, if you did have me, you would have thrown me up against a wall at midnight instead of wiping Gina's tears.
You told me to talk to her, so I did.
Yeah, I was testing you, Doug. Get a clue.
Tiffany Elizabeth Chester, are you jealous?
I'm sorry, jealous? No, I don't care. But you know, if I did care, I would say that, yeah, when your boyfriend is comforting his ex-fiance when he should be playing tonsil hockey with you, it might constitute for a tiny, nagging ping of jealousy,
Uh-huh. Boyfriend?
What?
Oh, did you just call me your boyfriend?
I have to go to class.
Well, it's winter break. We don't have class for like 3 weeks.
Dawn
so
class, Doug.
Hey guys, I'm Seth Travis, and we're here with Man of Metropolis speaking to Micah Stock, actor here in New York. You might know him from the new show Bonding, also a stage and theater actor, as well as starred in a show Brittany Runs a Marathon that premiered last year on Amazon, which is an incredible show. I saw it on opening day. So we're probably going to start with that, if that's okay, Micah.
Yeah, sure. I love that movie.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So I saw this show the first day that it came out on Amazon, and I actually was like really emotionally moved by the story. Obviously, it's kind of touching on a character wanting to sort of reset and change their life physically and emotionally, and you kind of play a friend to Brittany in that sort of search for sort of that reset in her life. And I'd love to kind of understand what your experience in maybe auditioning for that role or being cast in that role was like. And did you know going into it that it was maybe going to hit sort of the emotional nerve that it did?
I got the script from my agents and I read it, and it's really rare that you get one where you sit down and you just enjoy it. I felt like I was watching this movie and thinking, oh, I would love to see this movie. I think, my family would love to see this movie. And so I had known Paul, the writer director of Brittany, in the theater world. We were both theater kids, and he was a playwright as well. And so I had a meeting with him where I said, you're going to want to have someone like this play this part. You're going to want to do this, but really it should be me. It should be someone like me because this and this. And Paul goes, well, I'm meeting with you. So obviously I'm concerned that the part should be played by you. So then cut to a couple months later, and I came in and read for Paul and the producing team, Toby Maguire and Margot Hand and Matthew Pluff, and it was just goodwill from the get-go. And then once I was arrived on set, and it was Michaela and Utkarsh and Rel and Jillian, it was just honestly from get good vibes. And so when the movie had success, frankly, those of us, it's rare that when you're part of something, you're sort of like, yeah, I think this is what was supposed to happen. And we were very, very lucky to have it be received so wonderfully.
That's awesome. And so for people who are not like big movie buffs, right? Because the Man of Metropolis is sort of fashion and then kind of entertainment and culture. How would you describe or walk us through, maybe how the show or how the film was premiered? Was it at a film fest first and then came out on Amazon a few weeks or months later?
Yeah. So first, the film was accepted into competition at the Sundance Film Festival, and really only about 20 narrative films a year are accepted to the US dramatic competition. So that in and of itself was kind of a dream, right? Filmmakers and actors dream of having their film premiere in competition at Sundance. So I think I did have an internal sense that the film would do well, that people would connect with it, because I connected with it. And I think what we learned was through the lens of Brittany, who, I think 10 years ago, people would have thought like, oh, this is they would have designated this as like, this is a chick flick, all that kind of bullshit,
Yeah.
gendering any kind of art. And it was so clear when we sat in that premiere at Sundance and I looked around the theater and I saw people of all backgrounds, ages, genders, just snot rocketing tears and laughing, belly laughs. It was I'm actually frankly getting goosebumps a little bit because it was such a rich experience. And for me, the first time that I'd been in a film where I felt like truly a part of it. So yeah, then we were very lucky. We got bought up. I mean, it really was sort of like a Cinderella thing a little bit at each step. And I think I can say, just because, I didn't make the movie, I'm not the main character, that I'm not surprised that it did as well as it did.
Yeah.
Without sounding egotistical.
I want to definitely talk about your current project on Netflix, Bonding. That's going to be something that we really sort of discuss. But, I think something that's really interesting that is maybe less sort of searching about you on Wikipedia and kind of going on YouTube and just typing your name in, I think would be interesting for our viewers and also to myself, is love to know just a little bit more about you growing up. Like, what was life for you growing up like? And when did you kind of first become maybe aware of the interest of becoming an actor?
Yeah, so oddly, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and yeah, I'm actually there right now. Interestingly enough, I came to visit my parents.
Nice.
But it's a great place to be from, and Dayton, Ohio, surprisingly had a really vibrant arts community. So though it's true that it suffers from some of the same Midwestern small-mindedness, in many regards, it was a great place to grow up, and I had lots of access to the arts, and I had lots of mentors and teachers who sort of saw like, okay, this kid needs some like extra attention, and we need to tell them like, hey, hunker down, because eventually you're going to be able to leave this place and you're not going to have to worry about any of this shit. So I found theater very young, and it started, I think, because my mother put me and all of my siblings in dance classes. I think she always bemoaned the fact that she grew up and never had dance classes and felt very uncoordinated. So she wanted all of her children to be graceful and centered. And so my two older brothers, me and my younger sister, start off in ballet and gymnastics from a very young age. And I think that was sort of the, if you want to say, gateway drug into theater was dance for me.
And how old were you?
What's that?
And how old were you when you first kind of
started doing Tiny Tots ballet when I was 3 years old.
Wow.
And I continued doing all forms of dance, through high school, along with theater. Obviously, that's not a big part of my life now. I would never claim to be a professional dancer, but I got a good center. I can do some choreography if it comes up. But yeah, sort of found theater through that. And then it was the only thing that kept me firing on all cylinders. I know it sounds cheesy to say, but it really does feel like it chose me. Because for most of high school, I was thinking like, I'm going to go be a history teacher. I'm going to do this. But theater was the only thing that I actually liked showing up to every day. And so then when I was 18, it was kind of like, okay, this is, shit or get off the pot. And yeah, and I didn't look back.
That's amazing. And was there, after the sort of the gateway drug into dance is like, God, a 3-year-old, when you were in junior high or high school, Was there like a play or a performance that you felt like maybe solidified, like, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to go after?
Interestingly enough, I think it's that I loved theater so much, but I kept trying to escape it for whatever reason. I was, because I didn't want to be like tied down to one thing, even though that was the thing that allowed me to do all these other things, that allowed me
Mm,
to explore all these different kinds of people.
yeah,
So, I played football from 5th through 8th grade. I don't know why. Um, I think I think it was sort of armor a little bit from being a theater kid. It was like,
sure.
oh, if I play football, if I, do this, then um I was good. I think I was just big and angry. Uh and that helped. But no, it wasn't one thing. It was just that it was the thing. It was something that occupied my body, my mind, and my spirit in equal measure. And it
Sure.
allowed me to be all these different kinds of people. It allowed me to step into, the body of an astronaut, to step into the body of, whatever is playing in high school. You just end up playing middle-aged men, if you're tall. So was playing 60-year-old men from the ages of 14 to 20 until I entered the professional sphere. Um, so it would be hard to identify one thing, but I think if I were to say, it was just inescapable
Hmm.
ultimately.
Hmm.
Because frankly, if I'd been good at something else, I probably would have done that. It would have been a shit ton easier.
Awesome. Got it. Um, so obviously we know that you have some incredible experience sort of in the theater here in New York. You were nominated for a Tony, working opposite of huge actors, both in film and in theater. What was that sort of entry into theater in New York City like for you? And then talk to me a little bit about being nominated for a Tony. What was that feeling like in that experience?
Yeah. When I first got out of college, all I wanted to do was be a part of the downtown theater scene and do plays off Broadway and find my people. And that's where I put my attention. Was I just want to be working on new American plays as much as possible. Um, and so in some ways, uh, It's Only a Play, which was my Broadway debut, was an anomaly from the path that I thought I was going on, which, surprise, surprise, is, how it goes for most people, right? You choose something and then, someone throws a rock in the road and you have to veer the other way. But I was very lucky to do a play off Broadway of the great Terrence McNally, the late great Terrence McNally, who I feel very lucky to have collaborated with. At the end of his life, and call a friend. And the truth is that by doing a play of his off Broadway, and being seen by Nathan Lane and Jack O'Brien, who directed that play, that sort of set the career that I have now in motion.
Hmm.
And that's what got me that Broadway show. Um, I just said Broadway, Broadway, Broadway. um, yeah, and then it was, that whole year was surreal. I was 25 years old, and being in a big Broadway show, let alone being nominated for Tony, was, of course, it was a dream. Every
Sure.
kid who does plays dreams of those things and fantasizes about them. But I never thought that if it happened, it would happen that soon. I thought, okay, maybe I'll work my ass off, and in my 40s sometime, I'll, as a character actor, I'll get a great part, and that'll happen, and that'll feel good and validating. But it happened really quickly. And I have to say, like, as grateful as I am for that and what it did for my career, there's no but here. I'm grateful for that. It was great for my career,
Yeah.
and it felt really good. It was really exciting, but it also did put me in this position when I was 25 of being like, well, shit, like, what do I want now?
Mm,
This really cool thing that I thought might never happen, that I thought would be the pinnacle of a career, happened when I was young. This is not a complaint. I recognize that people are like, well, you, you kind uh, but
well, it's like the pressure is added, right? Like when you achieve faster than you imagined,
well,
right?
and not just yeah, yes, externally, but internally too. It was like,
Yeah.
whoa, I have to like really readjust where it is I'm going now. Like, what is it that I want next? And so after that, there was a year or two that I felt like I had these really wonderful but necessary growing pains of having to refine, okay, like what's my next, what is my goal now? What kinds of stories do I want to tell? What is my career? So as much as that was, uh, a fun marker and, you get a lot of attention and get all these things, really, I'm grateful for the opportunity to sort of say, okay, like I have to refocus what it is I'm trying to create.
Yeah, totally. Did you, I can't, and maybe it's getting insight into sort of your psyche here, but I mean, do you go to a bookstore or do you Google like top plays or sort of see what other actors were nominated for Golden Globes and Academy Awards? Like, what's your methodology in sort of saying my next project should be, or I want to be challenged after this Tony nomination with? Do you do
It
that, or
wasn't
is it less cerebral?
yes, and I would say it wasn't so tangible. It wasn't like I was, doing spreadsheets and being like, if I do A and B, then this is going to happen. Because first of all, I don't know if there's any career where you can do that. Maybe some have a perfect sort of like linear rise. But one thing I always knew about show business is that, you can't do that. If you're trying to make it a math problem,
Mm,
you're gonna get fucked every time. Uh, it was more about artistically, what is it that what do I want to do? What kind of stories do I want to tell? And at first it was, after that, I suddenly was able to do all these plays off Broadway and regionally that, were honestly people weren't seeing me for before I was in a big Broadway show. So I took a couple years and did plays I cared about, um, in the city, outside of the city. And then I I sort of made a decision of like, you know what, I love theater, I'm always gonna be there, but I, I was scared of film and TV.
mm,
I loved it. I consumed it all the time. It's what I was raised on. But I think I was scared that I didn't know where I belonged in it. When I walk into a rehearsal room, when I walk into a theater, I know what everybody's doing. I know what everybody's job is, and I know where I fit in that giant clockwork, right?
sure.
I know what my job is, and I feel confident coming in and doing that job. Now that's the case with film and TV, but 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I was an interloper, kind of walking in, being like, "Hey guys, like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. This guy doing the dial." It was all a mystery to me. So for me, it was so valuable. I needed to learn about being on set. I needed to learn about filmmaking in a way that wasn't about just being a fan and wasn't just about acting.
Hmm.
Because ultimately, a lot of people talk about the difference between acting for stage and acting for film, and there are differences. But ultimately, good acting on both comes from the same place. It comes from like the center of our souls. We may have to move our eyebrows less on screen, but it's the same thing. So now that I've been able to spend time on film and TV sets, I know what my cog is. I can look over. I know what the focus puller is doing. I know what, the hair and makeup people are doing. I know where everyone's supposed to be. And that for me allows me to fire up and do my job in the way that I want to do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, let's talk about this show, Bonding.
Sure.
I have to tell you, I stumbled upon it on Netflix. I want to say in February. It might have been January. Um,
Yeah.
And I mean, it is a dark comedy. Like we're talking like S&M, it's kinky, it's even, you know, graphic in certain senses, but it is really funny. And your character is this like, his name is Doug, and I think he's sort of like a golden retriever. Like I just, you know, he's kind
Yeah,
of like that.
that's an apt description.
Yeah, like he's just this kind of like, you know, handsome guy next door, like inserts humor when he's uncomfortable, like kind of fawning after it's Tiff is the character that's plays opposite Doug. But I would love to kind of take a step back and you know, because there's not really any show like this on any streaming platform or even on like HBO or Cinemax, etc. So I'd love to take a step back and kind of hear what it was like to you know, whether you were auditioning for this role, whether you were like sent the script from your agent, because it's very out of the box, and kind of walk us through like what that experience was like and maybe the auditioning process.
It's so interesting that and I don't think this is quite remote. It's interesting that you use the word that it's dark, because I find it extremely light and joyful, you know, despite the fact that it's about, you know, these things that society considers seedy and
Mm-hmm.
and um and other. I think the beautiful part about the show is it shows it's just, you know, people in the kink community, people in the BDSM community, you know, they're humans like us. They're, you know, they're experiencing joy and disappointment uh and hilarity, you know, within their lives in their
Sure.
workplace. Um so the show started, Writer Doyle, the writer creator, we met 13 years ago at a summer theater festival when we were in college, and we were friends, and sort of, you know, through the New York world we would run into each other over the years. And in 2017, I got this script. I knew it was writer had written it, and it was just supposed to be like a tiny web series. Netflix wasn't involved, nobody
Mm.
was involved. We shot it for on a shoestring budget, you know, over the course of 20 days. And I just sort of thought, oh, this is really fun. Like I can do whatever I want. I get to be with my friends. And frankly, though I thought it was good, I was like, probably no one will ever see this. Now, writer, if he heard this, was probably like, fuck you. People were always going to see it. I made a great TV show, and that was my plan. And I always thought it was great, but I just, you know, I was embittered about, you know, actors always, you do something small and then nothing happens to it. So I sort of prepared myself for that. And then it went to the Cannes Series Film Festival, and got picked up by Netflix. And it was like, holy shit, this thing that we had so much fun doing that I just
Mm-hmm.
made with friends is now going to be on Netflix. And then when we got picked up for a second season and we were sort of already under the umbrella of Netflix, it was crazy to show up on set, because you're like, you know, 2 years ago at Crafty, we had, you know, 5 M&Ms and like a bag of pretzels. And now, you know, we have sandwiches and trailers, and we're being paid money, and, you know, all these things that didn't happen first. So to me, it was just an example of like, go where your heart tells you, because and I'm not saying that I would never take a job for money. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you
Right.
know, someone's got to live, but it can't be the goal. Um, and so far, knock on wood, you know, the best things that have happened to me in my careers have been because I did something because I cared about it, not because it had external promise.
Sure, sure. Yeah, like you were saying earlier, you're not like sitting here doing like a strategic math equation on what project to take next or
Yeah. But about bonding specifically, what I love how sex positive it is. I love, um, especially in the second season, how much attention we've been able to bring to shadow banning in a BDSM community. I encourage everybody to go look up FOSTA SESTA and learn more about sex workers' rights, um, and see, you know, that people in the BDSM and kink community have a so much better have a much, I'm sure to say the word much, have a much better understanding of consent and communication than most people do,
Hmm.
which seems so stunning, right? You're like, oh, well, people are getting whipped and this and da da da. But to be able to do that safely and consciously, you have to have a deep level of communication. So I'm very grateful. One, I think the show's hilarious, but two, and sweet. But I'm also really grateful that I was able to learn about that and learn how important um, consent is in that community.
Sure. Um, I mean, it sounds, like your connection with the writer and director of this project goes way back, but so you obviously weren't shocked when you read the script or you presented the project even before it turned into season 2 for Netflix. But, what was your personal awareness or understanding of S&M and that culture? Did you kind of have to do like a deep dive before kind of going in to play the character Doug?
I didn't I think I had the same awareness that, most vanilla people have, which is that it's there. And I certainly had no judgment on it at all, but it just wasn't it wasn't my kink. It wasn't a community I was a part of. Um, and so wait, what was your question? What did you just
Just
say?
your understanding of like, were you really aware of S&M before taking on this character and joining the show? Or, were
Right,
you
right.
handed the script and you're like, I gotta Google this weekend, I gotta like
You
look up
know,
content.
for the first season, I think I sort of leaned upon the fact that Doug, the character I play on Bonding, is sort of like has no clue about all of it and falls in love with this girl and who is a dominatrix, and so has to say like, whoa, hey, like I have to be checking myself, and like I am going to learn about this community because the person I love, this is what she does and what she cares about. So I think I was able to sort of learn along with him, frankly. Um, and especially in the second season, I know that writer, the creator, was very conscious of, and he would say this too, there was some criticism from the BDSM community about the first season,
Hmm.
um, about some of the ins and outs of the representation of the community. And so it was very important to him in the second season to bring more people from that community into the project as both performers and consultants. We had a wonderful intimacy coordinator slash BDSM expert named Olivia Troy, who runs an organization um, whose name maybe we can insert there. I'm forgetting right now, but
No
Olivia Troy.
worries.
Um, and so the second season involved more people from the actual BDSM community, and that was a great learning experience too for those of us who were in the cast to be on set and say like, hey, what is this, what does this mean? So yeah, it was sort of learning as we went, and I was able to lean on that because narratively that sort of how it went.
Awesome. um I would love to ask you a little bit more about just the dynamic between your character Doug and Tiff, and maybe I don't necessarily think a character has to like learn a lesson in every episode or in a season or series, but maybe to kind of give our watchers or viewers a little bit of understanding of like who Doug is and who Tiff is, and what their relationship is besides the fact that they're starting to date and they're in college together.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you say what they learn. I was, a lot of sitcoms rely on the fact, and Bonding is not a sitcom, it's a comedy, but a lot of sitcoms rely on the characters never learning anything, right? It's like we wouldn't come back each week to Seinfeld if Kramer learns, not to run into shit. Like if he learned that, there would be no show.
Yeah.
Um, so the beautiful thing about Bonding is that not only is it hilarious, but these people are going through like have real arcs. And I think that's such a testament to writer that, and it's like humans too, right? We have our flaws, we think we've mastered them, and then like out of nowhere, it just pops right back up. And we think like, God, haven't we gotten better? That's what I loved and connected to most about the show. As far as Tiff and Doug's relationship, Tiff played by the wonderful uh, Zoe Levine, who I met, for the first time on set during the first season, we became great friends. I think their relationship, so many people connect to it because they seem diametrically opposed, right? You got this big goony guy who's smart but maybe a little bit obtuse, and who probably spent his weekends chugging beers with his buddies, even though he has a big heart. And so he meets this woman who sort of challenges all these traditional roles that he thought, even if he was, called himself a feminist, an active feminist, society still told him, like, oh, a woman should be this way. This is what love should look like. And so he's suddenly faced with, like, crashed with, oh, this image in my head that I have of, what a woman should be, what a relationship should look like, gets upturned. And I think the beautiful part about it is he realizes that by following what's real, you get to grow too, and you can have a relationship that's so much more special and rich than anything you imagined or society told you should have, in terms of being a man and a woman, being gendered, being cisgender, being heterosexual. And I loved exploring that on the show.
Yeah, one thing that I kind of took away from just that dynamic was feeling like there's a lot I think, especially when you're like a teenager and maybe even in college, you kind of create this, maybe society or culture tells you to do this, but you kind of create this like list of like what you want in a partner. Like, oh, they need to have a college degree, oh, they need to have a car, they need to have a clean apartment, they need to want to travel the world, like you could, they need to know what kind of wines exist and whatever those things are that make you attracted or interested in a person because of maybe what others' perspectives of you and your significant other will be based on what they do for a living, or if they understand wine tasting, whatever. I just thought it was interesting to see Doug's character be in this place where in his mind, he probably had this idea of like the kind of girl he wanted. And he's falling in love with Tiff, and she's like, probably wasn't on any of his list. Like, besides her being beautiful, like what she does for a living outside of studying in college. I just thought it was a very, very interesting sort of approach on who you fall in love with and who you choose to be attracted to. And I feel like a lot of, even in today's society, I feel like a lot of guys would be like, peace, see you later, like once they find out that one thing about Tiff.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that this character is like leaning in instead
of
he
leans in. I mean, the to give him credit, because we were talking about him having these images in head of what it should be. The thing I loved about Doug was his open-heartedness. That despite his own limitations, he's a guy who's like, well, I think one of my favorite scenes in the series is, when he finds out that she is a dominatrix. Spoiler alert, I guess, first season. You can cut it out if you want. Or I'll just do it out. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Stop listening for 10 seconds.
Well, if you watch a trailer, it's spoiled.
If you watch the trailer, he finds out she's a dominatrix, and she says, how do you feel about that? And he takes a second, he says, I don't know. Is that okay? And that's the first step, right? He says he's honest about his own potential judgment of it. And then, of course, watch the series, you'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And so, I think switching gears too, I think it's interesting because, this, like you said, was sort of a passion project that obviously entered film festival and then picked up by Netflix. Maybe more, this is probably more like the nuts and bolts of things and not necessarily the role that you played, but I'm just curious of like what the project transformed into when you came back to the second season? You kind of mentioned it like jokingly about craft services, which a lot of people don't know what that means. And that's just, it's sort of like the cafeteria on set, right?
Yeah, it's
But
one of the because actors and don't get to work that often, when they do work, they try and make you feel like you have everything you need.
sure, yeah, absolutely.
You're sort of treated like, on set, actors are sort of treated like toddlers. Anytime you go to the bathroom, someone's shepherding you there. You're always, if it's cold, everyone's making sure you're warm. They sort of treat you in all these ways to make you feel like you're special, even though you're not.
And probably to keep the train on time, right, for the next scene and the next shot.
Of course, because there are some squirrely actors, who probably are running around. I'm from Ohio, so the idea of not being available for someone when someone needs me fills me with the utmost terror. So, I'll do whatever anybody said. No, even the 18-year-old PA, I'll do whatever they need me to do. I'll just sit in my trailer.
That's amazing. Side note, I'll have to email it to your management team, but I follow a guy on TikTok in New York who is a PA, and his TikTok is like incredible. He like PAs on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel right now. But
wow.
He has like this fandom, and they mail him like gifts, and then he buys these custom rubber stamps and mails people.
I love that because PAs are undersung, man. It is it's a lot of different people. Whatever you're going to do in film and TV, it's it's an entry, it's a gateway to being on set and figuring out what that's like, whether you want to be a director, a costume designer, an actor, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But it is a thankless job, man. You're the first person there and the last person to leave. And I have a great deal of respect for PAs. And I want every PA to know that, who I've ever worked with and who I ever will work with, it's a safe space for PAs. I was a PA once.
There you go. Good shout out for everybody involved. It takes a village, right, to do a project.
It does. Absolutely.
I'd love to talk a little bit about your Disney Plus project as well, which I think is really interesting, and it's very different than Bonding. So could you describe a little bit more about this kind of NASA show, how you're supposed to be playing a kind of real life NASA astronaut?
Yeah, so it's based off of Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff, which was a very popular history of the birth of NASA and the Mercury 7 astronauts in the early 1960s. And I was aware of the book peripherally. I was aware of the movie that they made in the 80s, but it had never really been on my radar. And then the script came through, and to be honest with you, my first thought was like, why are they doing a show about a bunch of white dudes right now? And also, I'm not particularly interested in like masculinity, and it's like, it's just not. They've been exploring toxic masculinity on screen for centuries. We've seen every angle of it. You're
like, how do we follow Hidden Figures?
Yeah, exactly. We were telling these important stories already, but I read the script and I thought it was so beautifully written, and to me it was an exploration of both the wonder and the excitement of space flight, and politically sort of what that meant, what the space race meant. But I think what I connected to it on a deeper level was sort of the darker side of American nationalism and toxic masculinity, and how those things, pervaded. And though these men were brilliant and talented, and they were upheld as these upstanding moral citizens, and of course they weren't, right? They were just guys. And so that was sort of the thing that keyed me into it. And then of course, space is fucking cool. So we got to dive into that, and I got to really know the character I played, Deke Slayton, who not only was he a member of the Mercury 7, but worked for NASA up into the 80s and through the shuttle program. And so there was a great deal of information and resources that I could delve into
Hmm.
to sort of honor him and explore him on screen.
Yeah, so it sounds like this role, maybe you did more research than in the S&M.
Absolutely. I mean, I think something like Bonding, you sort of show up with your heart, and it was all, it was a vibe. It was the kind of work I was used to doing. And so I think in The Right Stuff, it was, you sort of had to build under the iceberg, right? And thankfully I was playing, a real person. So there's an incredible amount of information on him. There's a great
Sure.
deal of video and recording, but nobody knows who Deke Slayton is. So I didn't have the pressure of someone saying, well, he doesn't, sound exactly like him. He doesn't, there was no pressure to do an impression of
Right.
him, right? I could create the character that was needed for the show.
It's not like Kevin Costner played him in a 1980s movie and you had to like adapt your version and be constantly compared to somebody
Exactly.
else's.
No one's like, yeah, it's not like when someone plays Hamlet and they're like, let's see what he's gonna do with
Right.
Deke Slayton, the astronaut that most people haven't heard of. Now, that isn't to demote Deke Slayton. He was an incredible person who did a lot of really cool things. And frankly, is responsible for having chosen all the most famous astronauts that we know of, the Buzz Aldrins and the Neil Armstrongs of the world, the Sally Rides of the world, the Mae Jemisons of the world. Actually, that may have been later. I don't want to give him credit for something he didn't do. But he chose, all these astronauts for decades and decades, sort of the man behind the curtain.
It's awesome. And what was this project like when you kind of wrapped on, something that's a little bit more nuanced, right? Because there's so much sort of technology and jargon around anything NASA related, but then also like on a platform like Disney. Did you walk away from the experience kind of wanting to do maybe more like space sci-fi type stuff moving forward, or do you kind of like more sort of human stories that maybe kind of are similar to that, maybe the stage projects you've taken on?
I've never been someone who ascribed to a specific genre. I'm a sort of equal opportunity when it comes to genres. I love horror movies. I love, I've never been like, okay, now I want to do such and such.
Sure.
I've always been attracted to like, what's at the center of this story? So there's the skin of the thing. Okay. So it's like, it's about space, it's about NASA, or it's about BDSM, it's about this, but what's at the gooey center? What is the thing that I want to explore within that?
Sure.
And it was sort of great to go from, I was able to do the first season of The Right Stuff and then go directly to shooting the second season of Bonding. And I went from sort of this rigid world of the early 1960s that's sort of, people are just figuring out that you can be free within yourself, but still have this societal repression, to a show that was about like letting loose and like getting comfortable in your own skin and shedding that oppression. So it was a really nice, I'm sort of just realizing that was a great shift to be able to have, especially going, all that happened right before the pandemic started. So I was very lucky to have that energy going into, a horrible time for our world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, these are going to be a little bit more like fun questions that are obviously related to your career before we wrap up. But obviously, you have a show on Netflix, you have a show on Disney Plus. I'd love to know if you could like hop over to another show on Netflix and you could hop over to another show on Disney and be in it. Like, what would that show be? And like, who would you want to play like opposite of in a scene?
Oh, wow. I mean, It's a tough question. The first thing came to mind on Disney is I want to be in an animated series. I want to do a cartoon voice so bad. I spent, I didn't have friends when I was a kid. I just had books and movies. So I spent a lot of time at home doing funny voices in my room. So that would be, I guess, the first thing on Disney. I had one animation job once, and then I was cut out of the movie.
Ugh.
I know, I was so disappointed.
What is there a cartoon on Disney Plus right now that you're like watching over and over again that you wish you were in doing the VO?
Maybe this is why I don't watch cartoons. They're like, why would you want to be part of this? That's not true. I watch your BoJacks and your all that, but I just think it's so. To me, that was like even when I was a little kid, like that was the first form of expression, right? Like the characters I was attracted to were animated characters.
Yeah,
So I think it's probably just wanting to scratch that childhood itch.
sure.
As far as Netflix, I mean, how do you choose, right? Their
A lot.
library is so gigantic. I mean, for me, I'm always looking just like what's the next GUI center? Like
Mhm.
what's the pool of like slime and love that I want to jump into to be able to what's gonna turn me on in that way.
Got it. So I mean, obviously you're in some of these kind of bonding. I think is a great example of something that is out of the box, a little bit groundbreaking in the topic that it covers. And if you're a big budget project like, I don't know, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or a big budget project on Netflix like The Crown, like they get tons of press and coverage and trending on Twitter, et cetera. But you had mentioned earlier about going, like, I think it was going to camp or growing up with the writer director of Bonding. So you obviously have sort of your own sort of personal network of artists and creatives and people in theater and film. What streaming shows or projects that are out there right now that you're really passionate about, that you loved watching, that maybe a friend of yours is working on, that you would want our viewers or watchers to kind of know about more, that maybe they haven't seen on Twitter or haven't been pushed an ad on Instagram because it's maybe doesn't have like a huge budget or isn't like represented by a company like Disney?
Oh, that's a really good point. There are a couple movies I'm looking. I would say, in my mind, the independent film world now is, independent TV is a wonderful thing. A lot of great things have come from that. You think about Issa Rae, and Insecure. That came from her making a YouTube series, and now she's, people forget that because she's a star. I mean, she's a star beyond belief now, and deservedly so. I'm really excited about my friend Michael Trotter's film, The Evening Hour. It's about to come out. Michael is in The Right Stuff. He plays Gus Grissom, and he had worked on shepherding this film for many, many, many different years. And they got into Sundance, got distribution, and will be coming out sometime later this year. So I'm looking forward to that. The Evening Hour.
The Evening Hour.
Yeah, and what else is happening right now? I'm looking forward to Shakespeare in the Park returning this summer with Jocelyn Bio's adaptation of The Merry Wives of Windsor. Jocelyn is an incredible playwright. We kind of came out into the business at the same time, and she had started as and still acts, but at the time I knew her as an actor, and she had started writing a few plays, and I remember talking about it with her, and then she just blew up. She wrote this incredible play that premiered in New York called Schoolgirls, or the African Mean Girls play, that I encourage everyone to go look up. You can watch it, I believe, on PBS Great Performances. They filmed it for TV, and Jocelyn has gone on to write for television shows for Russian Doll. She appeared on Russian Doll, but her adaptation of Merry Wives of Windsor is kind of going to be the event of the summer, as far as I'm concerned, at the Delacorte in Central Park. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for getting together with us today. Is there, any upcoming project, you know, outside of what we sort of covered today that you want to make sure our viewers know about?
I wish there was that I could tell you about at the moment.
All good. I mean, I think the nice part about, I don't want to say the nice part about the pandemic, but I would say, you know, I think it's definitely giving us a lot of time to discover and think about and search out like what's next, whether it's a project for you or somebody thinking about moving across the country and all of that.
No, I think that's true. I think you're right. A lot of people, a lot of my friends, even those not in the industry, are sort of like, you know what? Now's the time to do that thing that in the back of my mind I told myself I would do. And I hope everybody's doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with that spirit, you know, is there something on your to-do list for the summer that's gonna like nourish your creative soul, or that you're, you know, gonna check off a list that you've been waiting to do and the timing is right?
In fact, yes, I have always been interested in backpacking and, you know, survival skills. Of course, I binged all 7 seasons of Alone on the History Channel, and now consider myself a wilderness survival expert, despite having never done that, not even for a couple of hours. Um, but I am an outdoors person. I am a camper, and so this summer, some friends and I are going to do a week on the Appalachian Trail. I think in Vermont. We're not sure which section, but you know, that's something that, in, if you want to call it pre-pandemic life, that I told myself I would do, but I was too scared to miss work or, you know, not be available. And the beautiful thing about this time, you know, if you can find any kind of positivity, and I recognize it's hard to, because there's been so much to be depressed about, uh, is that, you know, I got to come back to Ohio for a couple weeks. I haven't been home this long since I was 18 years old.
Hmm.
And I'm going to get to go do a week on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm not going to worry about, you know, am I missing this? Am I missing that? So I'm encouraging myself to take the time to do those things, and I hope everybody else is too.
It's awesome. Well, we will have to pay attention to your Instagram feed on your journey.
Oh, thank you. It's a very lazy Instagram feed, but so don't pay attention too hard.
All good. Well, thanks again, Micah. It's been great getting to know you a little bit more and hearing about what you're up to. And congratulations, of course, on both the Netflix and the Disney Plus projects.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate it. Nice talking to you too.
Seats have all been made to your specs, fellas. How do they feel?
Not like an airplane seat, is it?
Are these the final versions?
No, we'll use them to make the fiberglass seats, which will then be custom fit into each of your capsules.
And so, where are the controls gonna be if we're on our backs like this? Stick hereabouts?
The capsule prototype arrives tomorrow. You'll have a chance to see for yourself then.
It's no graceful way to get out of that.
I'm Seth Travis. I'm a creative director here in New York City and also founder of Man of Metropolis and Metropolis Report.